Gay. I was 9 years old, sitting alone in row 6 of a cold yellow school bus, when I first heard that word echoing from the seats behind me. It was neatly packaged inside of a quick but piercing insult, as if it felt comfortable, serving as a tool for violence. Although initially unaware of its significance, I could tell it felt both natural and out of place at the same time. A feeling I knew all too well. Faggot. I was 12 years old, utilizing social media as a means to understand my identity when I first encountered those 6 seemingly innocent letters. Initially oblivious, I looked up the word's meaning. A simple action that altered my perception of myself. I realized I was not only different, but my very existence was seemingly offensive. In a society in which LGBTQ+ education is not only scarce, but actively censored, I was forced to learn about myself and my community through unreliable means. Social media. With Instagram and YouTube as stand-ins for teachers, I matured without fully understanding who I was becoming and why I strayed from the status quo. But I was not and am not alone. In 2011, California became the first state to enact legislation requiring the implementation of LGBTQ+ inclusive education into state curricula. However, in the 13 years since, only 5 other states have followed suit. While that slight progress is inspiring, many other states are deliberately censoring this education. Most notably, Florida's Parental Rights in Education Bill, more commonly known as the Don't Say Gay Bill, which only a minority of Floridians support, prohibits classroom discussion regarding sexual orientation or gender identity through the 12th grade. And since that legislation, 30 similar anti-LGBTQ+ education laws have been passed in 16 states. As I said, deliberately censored. So what do I propose? The implementation of LGBTQ+ inclusive education into national curricula. But what does that mean? Many believe that this more inclusive education would result in primary school students learning about complex theory or detailed sexual education. But that is simply not the case. Instead, as teacher Sarah Springer states, primary school students might learn that families come in all shapes and sizes, and as they progress through middle school and beyond, they might learn about prominent LGBTQ+ figures, gaining insight into the challenges the community had to overcome to get to where it is today. So with that example in mind, let's walk together through the Rotary Four-Way test. First, is it the truth? Well, drawing from personal experience, if I'd learned about my community through school, rather than through unreliable means like social media, I would have learned that I wasn't abnormal. I would have felt seen, heard, and understood. But it's not just my personal experience. According to the American Bar Association, LGBTQ+ inclusive education promotes a positive school environment and student well-being for all. So yes, it's the truth. Second, is it fair to all concerns? Of course it is. With 20.8% of Generation Z self-identifying as LGBTQ+, LGBTQ+ inclusive education would directly benefit 1 in 5 of our nation's students without harming the other 4. While yes, some benefit directly more than others, I argue that it is imperative that all students receive this education because, like I mentioned, it would yield a positive school environment for all. Third, will it bring goodwill and better friendships? Let's look at the stats. According to the same American Bar Association study I mentioned earlier, a positive school environment for LGBTQ+ students increases academic motivation and decreases feelings of sadness, disconnectedness, and even suicidal ideation. In fact, these indicators saw a drastic reduction when LGBTQ+ students felt as safe at school as their straight cisgender peers. And finally, is it beneficial to all concerns? Well, I already mentioned that LGBTQ+ inclusive education would promote a positive school environment for all. But let me now give you an example. While writing this speech, I spoke to a friend of mine, Matt, who lives in the United Kingdom and identifies as straight. At school in the UK, Matt was able to receive LGBTQ plus inclusive education from a young age. And he told me that not only has his education not negatively impacted him in any way, but it made him, quote, more aware and welcoming of his peers. While Matt embodies just one example of the benefits of this education, thousands of others exist. But my goal is to change that number from thousands to tens of millions. So now that we've walked through the Rotary Four-Way test, I'd like to share one final example. At the beginning of this speech, I mentioned a couple of my many encounters with LGBTQ plus targeted hate speech. But let me now talk about the impacts of those remarks. 3 years ago this month, I attempted to take my life. And the self-hatred I internalized from those who had bullied me for my sexual orientation played a role in my choice to attempt. After a stay in the psych ward, I was sent to California to a residential rehabilitation center for 65 days, where I met other LGBTQ plus kids just like me. It was at rehab that I realized I wasn't abnormal. It was at rehab that I realized I wasn't weird. It was at rehab that I realized my worth. But I should have learned that from school. So now, as you consider your stance on implementing LGBTQ plus inclusive education into national curricula, I urge you to think of the approximately 15 million American LGBTQ plus students who face bullying just for being themselves. I urge you to think of the students who long for representation. I urge you to think of me. Thank you.